Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Tim and Jim Show. I am live in New York City at New York University at the Public Relations Society of America Tri-State Annual Conference, and I will let Jim Few, my co-host, take it away to introduce our amazing guest who's going to talk about content creation for small businesses.
Yes, and we are here live with our amazing guest, Mike Allton. And as some of you may have seen some of my alliterations to Star Wars, we have Yoda of Content Creation, Mike Allton, who not only does he work for Agora Pulse, he also runs the blogging Brute. He's also got the social media hat. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know Mike. We originally connected on a now defunct platform called Google Plus. And so I've been following Mike for a long time, but I still have struggled with the blogging part that Mike is, I would say, I look at him as one of the foremost experts. And Mike is coming to us live from St. Louis. So he, like me, is now depressed because baseball season is over. But we are very, very thankful to have you, Mike, and so welcome.
Thank you. And it makes me a little sad that we've known each other for so long. You've been following me for so long, and you still don't really excel at blogging. So apparently I'm not doing a good enough job.
Well, but you did give me some great pointers at social media marketing world, and I think it's helping me, at least with LinkedIn posts, just the whole idea of talking in our own voice and not attempting to become keyword stuffers. And I think that was really something that I'm taking to heart, and I'm getting there, Mike. You'll see.
Good.
So Tim, you want to start us out with our first question?
Absolutely. So Mike, where is the best place for small business to start creating content? There's so many places. Where do we begin?
Well, a lot of it depends on, frankly, your experience writing. Like if you've never really written before, you might not want to start writing for your business website or something that's going to be what we call lasting or somewhat evergreen or permanent. You might want to start with Twitter or some other social channel where you can kind of get your feet wet, communicating about your business, communicating with customers, getting to know what your personal style and brand voice is going to be. But that aside, if you have some sense of how to write and you understand what you want to communicate as a business, my absolute recommendation is to start with your own site, start with your blog. Don't try to syndicate, don't try to publish to other platforms like Medium or Blogger or even LinkedIn. Create content for your own blog first, for your own site. Now, sometimes when I say blog, some people's minds go in a different direction. I'm strictly speaking about written content. So you can call it a blog, you can call it articles, you can create FAQs, you can create white papers, whatever you want to create in terms of content, however you want to frame it, however you want to label it, doesn't really matter. The point is it's written content that exists on your site that you can share to social media, you can share with customers one-to-one, you can share via email. And of course, the hope is that you create content that answers questions that Google can find, and Google can then send people to that content. And this is the exact reason why I don't recommend going with Medium or LinkedIn Publisher or someplace like that where it's free. And so it's relatively easy, to push content there, but it's also unbranded. So if you create some content and you put it on a Medium site, people might find it, they might not. But once they consume that content, then what? They're not on your site. They're on medium.com or they're on Blogger or they're on LinkedIn. And so they're less inclined to see anything else that's about you. They're more inclined to be, frankly, distracted by notifications and other kinds of things that platform is trying to get them to do, which is to stay on that platform. And they're probably not going to take a next step, which is to learn more about your business, learn more about you, read more from you, and perhaps take a actual business result next step, which is to subscribe, write, or look at a product or service offering, or maybe even become a customer.
Wow. And Mike, you bring up a great point that I think the other thing about going on these other platforms is it's kind of the whole argument of why you need to have an email list, why you need to have a website is you don't, even though it's your content on their platform, you're not really owning it anymore because you've basically given it to them and it's not in theory, your content per se, because you don't read the fine print.
That is so true. Do either of you remember Posterous?
No, I do not.
I don't.
Posterous was a free blogging site. They were a contemporary of Tumblr back in the day. And by back in the day, I'm talking about 2010, 2008-ish. So nearly a decade ago. They had 4 million users using that platform. Twitter bought them and then shut them down. So those 4 million users lost their platform for content creation. They lost their platform for content distribution, and they lost all their content. Yeah, they were able to export it, but that didn't do them a whole lot of good. That was not public. That was not distributable. They had to recreate that content, and I'm sure most of them chose not to. We've seen it happen time and time again with Vine and other kinds of platforms. You spend a lot of time building an audience. You spend a lot of time creating and publishing content to that platform, and then it goes away. So that's a great point, Jim.
And the other thing too is I think Facebook's even been attempting to do that, Mike. And I mean, I know we all kind of have our opinions on where Facebook's going, but they're like basically trying to use notes as another way for people to quote unquote blog. But I still think it goes back to your earlier point is, you know, put your stuff on your site, you know, share it out, build your network. And, you know, and I know you're very consistent with that. And, you know, so I don't know. I mean, there's always all these changes, but I think ultimately it comes back to you want to own your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love Facebook. I really do. I love Facebook. I always have. And I love what we're doing today, which is to broadcast video. We're creating content right now on Facebook, among other platforms. But as a strategy and as a tactic, it can't stop there, right? We now have to take that video and make sure that we have an archived copy someplace, that it's distributed in other mediums, in other formats somehow, so that it doesn't live just on a single Facebook page, because heaven forbid Facebook should shut down your page. Facebook itself isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. And if it would, we would see that coming. Just as we saw Google Plus, we had plenty of notice that Google Plus was going away. But an individual person, an individual business or brand can absolutely have their account, their page shut down for almost any reason. It happens. So be safe with your content and be mindful of where you're putting it.
And that's a great point. And that kind of leads us into our next question, Mike. And that's, what strategies should we be using to create content of value?
Yeah. So obviously I'm a writer. And so I love to write. It's not just that I'm good at it. I really, really enjoy it. If I haven't written anything, whether I've published or not, a separate deal, right? But the writing process, that's just me in the system, me putting my thoughts onto pen and paper, so to speak. I enjoy that. That's what I do on Saturday and Sunday afternoons when my girls are napping. I spend 2 or 3 hours a day just writing. And if I don't get that opportunity, I start to twitch and I get a little nervous because it's something I'm missing. I recognize not everybody else is like that, right? I recognize that most people don't enjoy that process for whatever reason. And we can talk through that if you'd like. But that said, that's the number one thing to do, is to create written content in some way, because that's still what's going to power Google search and Bing and Yahoo search. And that's still what people are going to link to 9 times out of 10. It's much harder to see that kind of success with video or audio content. Not that you can't, but it's easier to create written content. But if you don't like to write, do this. Start with video content. Start with either recording yourself, talking, and then turn that into a blog post, or do a video interview like we're doing now and turn that into written blog posts.
Right. And you wrote an article, Mike, and if you want to share that in the comments, we'd love to do that. Is on, I think it was 26 ways to repurpose your Facebook Live.
Right. So the idea there was, because it's so easy to create video, it's not easy, but it's easier. Right. And it's usually something that, for the most part, people are more comfortable. Yeah, that you've got the, well, actually, I can't change it, share it to the,
you can just put it in the comments.
I'll put it in the private chat. And you guys
there
can
you
put it in there. This format is super powerful for so many reasons. First of all, we all have this technology. We can use StreamYard. You can use Ecamm. You can just go straight natively live into almost all the platforms and create this video content. We all have smartphones. We all have laptops with the technology built in to be able to do this. So there are virtually no hurdles from a technological perspective to create content in this way. And when you bring on a guest like me, or when I bring on a guest like Amari Smith or Stephanie Liu or somebody like that, they're able to impart their expert knowledge and their authority, and I'm able to draw on that and create content around that, rather than me simply having to share what I know and talk for 30 to 60 minutes on my own. Some people can do that, and that's great if you can. But when you bring in that guest, you bring in that extra element of knowledge, and you get to bring in their audience, right? You guys set this up and you scheduled it, and I shared it. Right, I retweeted your tweets and shared it to my profiles and so on. So some of my audience is coming on board and watching this either live or after the fact, depending on their convenience. But the really, really cool part that I enjoy about this particular kind of process is that once we're done, once we finish today's broadcast, let's say it goes 60 minutes. Now we've got a 60-minute video that we can chop up, and we can upload segments of that to all the other platforms. We can take the audio out and turn that into a podcast. And we can create audiograms and other kinds of things. And you can take quote graphics. If I say something brilliant, which probably isn't going to happen, but if I did, you could turn that into a quote graphic, and you could embed that or share that however you want. And if I talk for 60 minutes with you and we have a great conversation via video, if I'm speaking for 60 minutes, that's approximately 10,000 words of content, which is really an epic piece of written content that you can have transcribed and summarized and published as a blog post. So there are so many ways that you can take this 1-hour video and leverage this long term.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. I mean, and what do you use any, well, we'll get into the tools, but is there anything you like to use in particular for that to repurpose it?
Interestingly, no, because I actually don't do a lot of live video myself. I'm a guest, which I enjoy doing. I don't like being the host personally. I produce a live video show for Agorapulse, which we're in Friday will be our 7th episode. So we're actually researching right now what our options are. There are some services that do this kind of thing. You can do it yourself.
Right.
Absolutely. If you have the time. It does take time to do what I just described. I would definitely not recommend transcribing any kind of video yourself, because that's just an insane amount of time, and it's so cheap to use, like a rev.com. That's like $1 a minute or something like that, to just have the whole thing transcribed and time-stamped, and then you've got that written summary or that written transcription, and then you can create a written summary relatively easily because you were there, right? And you can refer to the transcript to refresh your memory as to what happened. And you can create the graphics, and you can upload the video, and you can certainly take that video and pull it into like an iMovie if you're on a Mac, not an Android, but if you're on a Mac.
Here we go again. Here we go.
and you can, because it's free and it's easy. You can just pull in the video, and you can right mouse click it, and you can say, there's I forget what it says, separate audio or something like that. And now you've got the video separated from the audio, and you can save that as an audio file with a little bit of editing. I did this with the 360 Marketing Squad, right? With Jen Herman, Amanda Robinson, Stephanie Liu, and I. We did 10 Facebook Live episodes starting about this time last year and going into January, February. And I turned them all into a podcast series. And I did all that myself. It was hours of work total, but not an insane amount of work. So depending on your business model, if you're going to do a weekly show like Agorapulse is doing with Social Pulse Weekly, I would probably recommend outsourcing a lot of that. I'm talking with Content 10X, Amy Woods out of London right now. We're going to try to have her do exactly that for us. Take that 1-hour video and edit it. So, but if there are any technical issues, like if somebody's camera stopped working at the beginning of the show, you can edit that out, right?
Right.
And fix that so that your permanent record, your permanent video looks perfect, right? And then they can take the audio and add an intro and an outro and maybe some bumpers that you've pre-recorded and upload that to Libsyn and get that pushed out to iTunes and Stitcher and so on. So now you've got a podcast going. All those things can be easily outsourced.
Wow.
And also Facebook is rolling out the ability to create not lips, to create clips from your live videos. Gotta
The
love
lips
that
you bring
live
yourself.
Well,
you
the
have the
lips is in stories.
That's right. That's right. No, that's perfect. And I just tested this on a Friday. It was really interesting. I went after at Agora Pulse, our social media manager, Jennifer, is the host of Social Pulse Weekly. So she interviews a guest. So Friday, she had Mari Smith. So after Friday's show, I went back and I found a nice clip where Mari is talking about, what was she talking about? Instagram DMs coming to desktop. And I clipped that 2 or 3 minute segment all within Facebook's Creator Studio. So I never left the Facebook platform. I didn't have to do anything on my desktop or download the video. And by clipping it, what I created was a separate clip. It didn't touch the live video, the recorded video at all, but it created a separate, about a 3 minute video segment that was now in our videos library, which I could then share out to our Facebook page into the feed for people to, if they didn't see the whole thing, right, they could just see that segment, and I can also download that and upload that to other platforms. It's not the most powerful or most fine-tuned tool. This would be something quick if you don't want to mess with anything else. You really have to know, for instance, exactly what timestamps you want to start and end that clip from. There's a little scrubber that you can move back and forth, and if you don't really know those timestamps perfectly, it's a little touchy, but it's also free. So there's a really cool option. You're right, Tim.
Awesome.
I also know it's a little touchy they also have the feature that you can clip at the beginning and the end, and I know that's also a little tricky, but if you can trim it, if you're on a time,
right. So Tim, you want to go with our next question?
Are there any tricks, tips, or tools or lips to repurpose your content?
Yeah, and this is exactly what we've been touching on. Rev.com, as I mentioned, is the tool that I would typically recommend you start with for getting a transcript, or you can also upload to YouTube and see what YouTube gives you. If you're on a budget, you want to do a lot of this yourself, a lot of DIY stuff, upload your video to YouTube and let YouTube create your captioning file, your SRT file, and see how that goes. You're going to have to clean it up. The AI isn't good enough today yet to recognize all of the individual words and the jargon that you might use or the names that you might use, but it's still going to save you a lot of time from trying to do that from scratch. I believe I've tried to transcribe video from scratch, and I can type. That's not good. So I would do that. Headliner.app is a great tool that I like to use to create those audiograms. These are they're technically videos, right? But usually it's a static graphic with maybe a wave, a animated wave, and some audio, right? So if we take this segment of this show where I'm talking about how to use Headliner app, you would only take the audio of me speaking, and you would have a graphic that said, hey, this is Mike with Tim and Jim, and we're talking about repurposing content, and here's Mike's take on how to use Headliner. And then you would see the little WAV file of me speaking, right? That's pretty cool, and it's interesting, and it's fun to create those and upload those to LinkedIn and other kinds of platforms like that. Canva is what I use to create graphics. So again, when somebody says something really interesting and compelling in a live video, I definitely recommend jumping into Canva, having a template ready to go, and popping in some of their quotes with their name. And that's a great thing to share out to Twitter. And of course, other channels. Facebook is good for that too. In terms of other tricks, I would say come up with a workflow and a process, particularly if you have a team where you can like maybe build it up in Asana or something like that. But have a process and have time set aside to do it. Because if you don't, it's not going to get done. And that's going to be a real shame. And it harkens back to what we talked about earlier, where when you create the content, it can't live on a platform that you don't own, right? So if you go live to Facebook, make sure you've got a plan in place for what to do with that recorded video once you're done going live. Like for me, I use Ecamm to go live. StreamYard's great. I happen to use Ecamm. And so with Ecamm, I'm recording to my desktop as I'm simultaneously streaming live. So as soon as I'm done with the broadcast, I already have an HD recording on my desktop that I can then upload to a Google Drive. So we've got an archived version of that. And then I can pull it into iMovie, which is the tool I use for editing. And that's something that, again, you're going to want to decide in advance. All right, every time we go live, we're going to upload the video to YouTube if you weren't already streaming to YouTube like you guys are now. And we're going to strip the audio out and turn it into a podcast. We're going to send the video to Rev to get the transcript, and then send that transcript and a copy of the video over to our editor if you've got somebody else, or back to yourself if you're going to create the written content, and you're going to have that published. And then you're going to go to Canva or Easel to create the graphics associated with the blog post and any other kinds of promotional things that you want to do online to talk about that particular event, and get that content done and published within a certain amount of time so that it's out there and it's still fresh. That's
Wow.
really, really critical and important.
And Mike, have you done anything yet? I know that, I'm a member of the 360 Squad. You guys provide a lot of great, valuable information out there. Are you guys doing anything with Alexa flash briefings yet?
I did. In fact, every single one of the podcasts, I put the whole thing on Alexa. Probably not the best idea. It was really more of an experiment on my part to figure out, okay, how does this Alexa thing work? People tend to not want to listen to Alexa for a full 60 minutes. By briefing, they really, really want brief. So what I should have done, and what I'll do in the future, if it makes sense, is do a quick 60 to like 1 to 3 minute summary of an episode and upload that to Alexa as a separate thing. So the cool thing about Alexa is it can use the same Libsyn account. So when you're creating a podcast, you're creating audio files and you're uploading them to a hosting service like Libsyn, and Libsyn creates a feed just like your blog has a feed. And so you plug that feed into iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher, and that's how they know you've had new uploaded content. Amazon does the same thing. But what I should have done was created a second separate feed inside of Libsyn and recorded specific summaries of each episode and used those as the flash briefing. So basically, Alexa subscribers could have been notified that we had a new podcast available and then gone over to their favorite podcast player and downloaded it.
Right. And kind of like your whole point of, it could have been some of the highlights. And if you want to listen to the full version, go here. Now, you mentioned Libsyn. I've heard people talk about Anchor and all these other things. So is your preference to go with Libsyn, say, versus an Anchor if you're going to do podcast?
Well, in full transparency, I am not a podcast person per se. So Libsyn is what I happen to use. I have not looked at any of the alternatives, so I don't know.
Okay.
I really couldn't say that it's better or worse than any other option.
Right. Oh, yeah, this is awesome. Tim, any other thoughts, comments, tools?
No, I think this is really good. I'm glad we're touching on podcasting because that's something that I know a lot of small business owners are not doing. I know more and more are doing video, catching on slowly, especially among the smaller businesses. But I think this is great. We're touching on repurposing, the audio and all these different tools. So.
Well, and I think that's a great point that you bring up, Tim. I was recently.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, you always bring up a great point. But I was recently at a conference with Marissa, and a lot of it is that everybody's wanting to. It's almost like, I won't say that it's like the cool thing of the month, but everybody wants to make a podcast. But yet, to Mike, the blogging brute, we're still not writing, and we're still to your point, we're still not even doing video. So how am I going to find you in a sea of thousands of podcasts when it's audio? So I think podcasts are great, but I almost feel like you still have to build that audience elsewhere to get them to want to listen to you. Because I mean, I hear about these podcasts every once in a while, and these people have, hundreds of episodes, and not to say, because there's billions of people on Facebook, I've never heard of them, and it might be great content. So, I think, you can't be everywhere. I mean, you can try, but it's that Andrew and Pete, 90% do that one thing that you're good at.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And a lot of the consideration is, as you've touched on, your audience. Who are they? Where are they? What kinds of content do they tend to want to consume? And how big is it really? Yeah, there are billions of people on Facebook, but do you really need to reach billions with your business? Most of us probably not. Most of us can't scale that much. Most of us wouldn't know what to do with a billion customers. We would have to close. The demand would be too high. And so the smaller your business, the more true this becomes. So if you scale all the way down to local businesses, they don't need to do all these things. They don't have the time, they don't have the resources, but they don't have the need. You don't have to have a YouTube channel and a podcast and an active blog and a Facebook page and a Twitter. You don't need all that stuff. And Peter, absolutely right. You focus on one thing. Now, you don't want to totally exclude everything, because that goes back to our original point. If your profile or the platform goes away and that's the only place that you built an audience, well, then now you've got a whole different issue. But if you can, first of all, think about where your audience is and the kind of content they like to consume. And secondly, what do you like to do, right? Do you like to do video? Are you comfortable in the camera? Are you able to communicate via camera, in ways that people enjoy, or they're kind of like, he's got a face for radio. So let's move over to the audio side. Or maybe you like to write like me. Hopefully between writing or speaking on camera or speaking into the microphone, there is some way that you have of communicating that you're comfortable with. And if there's not, well, then you're going to have to work on that and figure out what that is, because that's where you should lean in. Right. And try to do more of that thing, whether it's video or speaking or writing.
Right. No, that's and I think that one of the reasons that Tim and I really knew we had to start creating that YouTube channel goes back to your earlier point. I think there's been at least 2, if not 3 episodes that were affected by Facebook going down and not having that backup to allow you to, the show must go on, so to speak, really made us think like, and then I think one of the things, and I lead off a lot of my social media workshops with, we're all problem solvers. And 92% of people start their search, for the solution of their problem on Google, which also owns YouTube. I'm not going into the Facebook search bar and asking, how do I write a blog? Just don't do that. It's not in the psychology. So I think, to your point, how are people going to find us? And we need to at least have some sort of presence to let us find us as their problem solver.
Absolutely right. Yes. Hi, Amy. I see Amy Aram's watching.
Amy's watching from California. Thank you, Amy, for joining us. And so, Mike, we've talked about this before. How do Tim and I, and Tim's a better writer than me because he used to work for a publication. How do we overcome writer and bloggers block?
Yeah, I love this question. And there's a lot of nuance here in terms of, okay, what are we really talking about? What does writer's block mean? For some of us, it means we don't like to write. It means I think I'm not a good writer. I think I have nothing to write about. And so there's this initial challenge or hurdle or creative block that's stopping me from ever doing any kind of writing. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the other kind of writer's block is more of a intermediary thing that comes up every once in a while, where normally I'm pretty good, but today, for whatever reason, my mind's a blank and I can't get this done. So there's a creative block there, which happens to all of us at one time or another. So for the first one, that initial challenge, which obviously I talk to people all the time who have this issue. They think they're not good writers. They just, that's what they believe. And so part of it's a, self-perpetuating, issue where they believe that. So it's true. Blogging is a skill that has to be learned and practiced and refined and honed and mastered, like so many other things. No one's born being a great blogger. No one's born being a great writer or communicator. You have to practice that and study, and you have to want to do it well, like anything else. And if you don't have that desire, okay, well, then there may be other things like, other ways that you can communicate if you want to. But I'll tell you what, if you're in business You have to write. I'm sorry, you have to write. You have to create email content. When you upload this video to YouTube, you have to write a title for it. You have to write a description for it. The platform requires it of you. When you go to Twitter, you have to write tweets. You have to create descriptions for your social content. You have to write your homepage. You have to write your about page. You have to write. Everybody writes, as Anne Hanley said. So saying that I'm not a good writer is kind of a cop-out for a lot of people, unfortunately. You have to come to the realization, well, maybe I don't enjoy it, and that's okay, but I don't enjoy doing taxes, and I don't enjoy doing payroll, but these are things that I have to do, and the better I do them, the better my business is going to perform. So maybe I should learn how to be a good writer. That aside, one of the really key things that Jim, you mentioned before that I know I've told you, and I know I've told other people, and it's really helped them. When you're creating content for customers, whether it's a blog or something like that, try not to get too hung up on form. Try not to think like you're trying to write a research paper or something like that for school. Instead, write just as if you were talking to me face to face. If I came to you, Jim, and I asked you to teach me about chatbots and tell me what you know about chatbots, I would expect your written answer to be just like your verbal answer, just like you were talking to me over the phone. I don't know why people do this anymore, because phones don't look like this.
Right.
Sorry.
No, but I get it. I'm that age. I understand it.
Yeah. So yeah, we're all old enough to get that reference. Thank you. Yeah. Write the way you would talk to somebody, because first of all, it's going to be easier on you. You're just going to share the knowledge that's in your head. Don't try to go research stuff. Don't, because if you're researching, that means you're trying to teach me something you didn't know. And I am not your college professor. I'm a colleague or I'm a potential customer. And either way, I don't want research. I want to know what you know. I want to see that you know what you're talking about and can help me. I want you, as you said, to answer my questions based on what you already have up here. So share what's up there in a conversational way. That's easier on you, and it's easier on me.
And so would you even say write in first person?
Yes. Yeah, if possible, if it makes sense for your brand. That's a great question. It's a good consideration, right? Think about, are you representing a small business? If you were to say I on your homepage or about page or in a blog post, would your audience understand who that I is? Is it fairly obvious, right? If you go to the Blogging Brute, bloggingbrute.com, which is my personal blog where I talk about blogging, that sort of thing, I'm pretty much the only writer there. There's a couple other contributors over the past couple months, but it's basically me. So when I say I in one of those articles, it's fairly apparent who that I is. It's my face that's in the sidebar. It's my face that's at the bottom. If your website and your brand doesn't have that kind of personal touch or impact or design, to your point, yeah, maybe you should say we, or at least make it clear at the outset who it is that's talking. Great question.
Tim, you have any questions or on that specific thing?
Mike, in terms of blogging and repurposing content, say there's a small business owner that, their business is going really well. They're really busy. They really have no interest in any of this content. When do you think it makes sense for a business to outsource some of its content or repurpose it?
I love where you were going with this question, because I used to work a lot with small business owners. I don't anymore, but I had previous jobs, right, where I was like selling to small business owners and talking to them about marketing every day. And a lot of them came at me with this particular thing. Well, I've got plenty of business. I have too much business right now. I'm turning away customers. To which I always responded, that's great. Congratulations. Do you still want that problem tomorrow?
Right.
Or is there a potential that maybe next week you won't have as many customers? Because if that's possible, then we need to keep marketing. We need to keep putting content out there that potential customers can continue to find, because we never want that hose to dry up or that pipe to dry up, pick your metaphor. So exactly. Definitely they need to keep creating content. Now, whether they can outsource or not, that's the nuance to the question. And one of the things that I always like to consider is whether or not it's possible for a specific business to have content outsourced and be at least almost as good as what they could create themselves. And so some people, they tell me, well, I'm not a writer, so I'm not going to be able to create good content. And I get it. I understand, because we already talked about, there's expertise and practice, and there's a blogging muscle that has to be worked out and maintained. But no one knows your business as well as you do. No one, particularly not a VA from the Philippines that you might choose to outsource to because it's really, really cheap. They're not going to know your business. They can research, right? I did this for a client of mine. I had a client who sold swimming pools in the Boston area. And I didn't do outsourced writing as a service, but what I was doing was SEO consulting. And we decided, well, we really want to get in front of the pool owners in all these areas. And so I thought, well, let's talk about pool fencing, and let's create a resource that if you're in Salem, Massachusetts, and you want to install a pool, let's make it easy for them to find and understand what the fencing requirements are for pools in Salem, Massachusetts. And what I unfortunately got myself into, because he refused to do it, was I ended up having to research the actual pool laws in every one of the communities that he serviced.
Wow.
So I have read the bylaws for Salem, Massachusetts, which are not fun reading. Let me make that clear. They're not entertaining, but I've researched the bylaws so that I could write a piece of content that communicated those bylaws in an easy to understand way. I didn't know a lot about pools. I actually know more about pools now than I did back then, because now I actually sold pools for a while. But my point was, I created content for him that wasn't awesome, but I did it. It's not in his voice because it's me writing.
Right.
So, to your point, should they outsource? I'd prefer not. That's usually not my first recommendation. My first recommendation is, as the owner or the CMO or whatever person responsible for the content in the organization, they're going to know the company, they're going to know the product and services, they're going to know the audience way better than what they could outsource. But if it's a question of we're either going to outsource it or we're not going to do it, well, definitely outsource.
Gotcha.
Well, and I like the idea too that you bring up, Mike, about just recording those thoughts and then having that repurposed into a blog post would even be better. If that's the thing is like, oh, I don't have time to write. Well, the beauty of technology is now we can record these things and have it turned into written format. And then we're also talking in that conversational voice that's going to make a lot more sense. And I think that we sometimes forget that that's the beauty of what we can do today.
Absolutely. Because, everyone's got one of these. It's a phone, right? So maybe I'm running a pool company in Cleveland, Ohio, and maybe I'm going out to customers' sites every single day and looking at places to install pools, and I'm fixing pools. I can record a video of myself talking about one of these experiences, and maybe even interviewing a really, really happy customer and creating some video content that we've already listed 16 different ways you can repurpose it.
Right. So, Tim, you want to ask our final question for today?
Yes. Mike, what 3 action steps can we take today to make 2020 our best content year yet?
Awesome question. So what I want you first to do is think about, like we talked about earlier, what kind of content are you going to create? Is it video? Is it audio? Is it written? I'm obviously going to recommend written in some way. Somehow get to the point where you're creating written content, then determine a frequency and commit to that. By frequency, I'm asking about whether it's going to be weekly, monthly, multiple times a week, whatever. And of course, that begs the question, well, Mike, how often should I blog? People ask me that all the time. The answer is kind of simple. It depends on how fast you want to achieve success. If you have not been blogging, if you have not been creating written content, and you're starting from scratch today, how long do you want to wait before you start to get real measurable results? And by measurable results, I'm talking about organic Google traffic that is coming into your site and converting into actual leads and sales. And HubSpot has done some research on this. And HubSpot's research found that when they looked at a bunch of companies that were doing blogging, and they went back through their archive and looked at how many posts they had and how much traffic, leads, and sales they were getting, they found that on average, it took about 50 pieces of content to begin to see exponential increases in traffic, leads, and sales. So then that's the answer to your question. You need 50 pieces of content to get to that point where you're starting to see real measurable results. And how long is that going to take you? If you're creating and publishing content once a week, that's going to take you a year. If you don't want to wait a year, if you really want to see this succeed within 6 months, then you need to publish 2 to 3 times a week. So that's the mathematical answer to that question of how often you need to publish. So that's the first step. Decide what kind of content you're going to create and commit to creating and publishing that content at that frequency we need to see success in the time that we want to see it. Second step then is to decide, well, what are we going to talk about, right? What are the key topics that we need to discuss in this content that our audience is interested in? And for that, you're going to need to do some research. You're going to need to use like Google Keyword Planner, SEMrush, something like that, where you're actually plugging in some specific words, some keyword phrases, and you're seeing what the demand is, what the interest is, and what the competition is for those specific keyword phrases. Like for me, one of my really, really critical, important keyword phrases is how to start a blog. I want people to come to learn from me to how to start a blog. And I actually created some content around that phrase on the social media hat a couple years ago. And it was designed from the outset to be a top-ranked piece of content. And this actually led me to see one of the issues that I had with my site. At the social media hat, I was obviously writing about social media, but I was also writing about blogging. And I was writing about email marketing, and I was writing about SEO, and I was writing about anything digital marketing, and even some offline marketing, and even some non-marketing business stuff. My content was a little too unfocused. And so when I created a piece of content called How to Start a Blog, that I knew from my professional experience and authority that this should have been a page 1 search result, and it languished on page 5 or 6 of Google search results behind pieces of content that had no business ranking above this in terms of the actual content, I came to understand that it was because it was off topic from the social media hat. It wasn't about social media, and Google knew that. And so that's why I created bloggingbrute.com. I put all my blogging content on a completely different domain in a completely different website. I had over 100 pieces of blogging content on the social media hat that combined had 250 page views Q4 of last year. That's terrible. That's 2 people a month looking at a couple of different these posts. Now that content gets 300 to 400 page views a day, and it's going up because I pulled it off of an unrelated site and I created a whole new resource just for that. So that's to underline the point that you have to have a focus. You have to decide what is you're going to talk about that relates to your business, that your customers are interested in, and do some research on the questions they're asking and make a plan to answer those questions.
That is such an amazing point, Mike, because I think people get caught up in, and I would have never really thought about that. And I guess maybe it's because I knew you. And thinking about the social media hat, I was like, well, yeah, he talks about blogging, he talks about all this stuff, but I know you, where the casual searcher may not. It's like, well, this isn't really what I was looking for. But I think people get caught up in like, oh, well, I don't want to start a new website because that's going to require resources and time. But it's like, but you're not going to get successful because your message is muddled. I love that. I love that point.
Yeah, I mean, my hope is to help people identify this potential issue before it's an issue for them, right? I mean, I used to live blog Apple iPhone releases, like when the Apple 3 or the iPhone 3 GS came out. I was live blogging that. Well, that was a total waste of my time. I guess I had some fun, but that content doesn't do anything for me. It never did anything for me. I never got a single sale out of creating that content because it was too off topic from where my focus should have been, which at the time was social media. Now I've got 2 sites. I've got Social Media Hat and Blogging Brew because I still like blogging about both topics, content marketing, social media marketing, but I've got 2 different destinations for it. You're right. Most people don't want a second website. Most people shouldn't have to create a second website. Just stay focused. Decide what your 3 main categories are going to be, the 3 main buckets of content that you're going to create. Maybe these align with products or services. That's usually the ideal. And this goes into the 3rd step, which is really kind of advanced content marketing strategy. But I want to touch on it because it's important. Identify what those 3 categories are. Have 4 or 5 if you need them, but try to stick to 3. And then create pyramids or content silos where you're creating content within those categories and you're trying to lead people into a buyer's funnel or a sales funnel and ultimately a business decision with every piece of content that you create.
Wow. Yeah. No, yeah. And I think we don't think about that stuff, but this is something, I mean, these are 3 great steps that really small businesses, even, people that are thinking about starting a business should be considering, because if you set it up right up front, it'll be that much less painful later.
Absolutely. So, you mentioned at the outset, I mean, right at the beginning of the video of the interview, about how consistent I am in terms of creating content. And I have to call you out and correct you. I'm not consistent. Now, you wouldn't know this because you're not actually like looking at my sites and counting, okay, how often does Mike blog really? When does he come out with stuff? It's a misperception, common misperception, because I've created so much content. I have been consistent. I've been prolific in creating content in the past. I have been so prolific and so consistent in the past, I no longer have to. I have created so much content and so much valuable content that is structured that now, because that content is ranking well in Google search, I'm getting traffic to my site, thousands of visitors every single day coming in to the key posts and taking the next steps that I want them to take. I don't have to publish this week if I don't want to. And in fact, I didn't. Like, I moved. I picked up my whole family. We moved 2 weeks ago. And like I said, weekends are usually when I write. Well, weekends have been pretty busy for me the past month and a half. I really have not published that much. Nobody notices.
That's a great point. I think, well, I guess because we're connected, I always know that you're working on something. So I'll give you that. And I'm always looking for your Star Wars stuff. So I just shared your website for Blogging Brute in the comments. And so Mike, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Well, that's usually the first step, bloggingbrute.com. Excuse me. That's where you're going to be able to find, like I said, all of the information that I have about blogging. I've got ebooks there, all kinds of free downloads, and of course, all kinds of articles that you can read online if you want to really learn content marketing. And if you want to go to that next step and really dig into that advanced teaching that I was talking about with the content pyramid and learning how to really structure your content so that it delivers results, there's a course there that you can take that'll really teach you that with a workbook and everything. But so that's the place to start. And then if you just like to connect on social, I'm everywhere. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it.
Right. Well, Mike, thank you so much. Tim had to run back to the conference. He's going to become more of an expert on public relations. At something that I know I struggle with, but someday I'll figure it out. I'd rather blog first, so I will say
there
that.
You go.
And so we're so excited to have you. I don't know if people caught all the little Star Wars alliterations, but you and I are both big Star Wars fans, and I love how you're bringing some of that Star Wars stuff into your post. And I think that's the other thing is, that's a part of your personality. And I think small business owners need to think about that, is bring some of your personality into your business, because we all want to work with people we know, like, and trust, and that we can relate to. So I know that's something I always enjoy. And I know sometimes we kind of play around on Twitter with those different things as well. So, but thank you, Mike. And next week, if you want to learn about live streaming, we're going to have Jennifer Quinn, also known as Jenny Q, who's considered one of the top live streamers in the world. So we're excited to have her on, and she's going to talk a little bit about how you can monetize your live stream. So we look forward to seeing everyone next week. Thank you, Mike. And I look forward to seeing you in person, definitely in San Diego. And who knows, could always be sometime before that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim.
All right. Thanks, Mike.